In a world of increasing media influence, society struggles to keep up with the implications of our modern media and communication technologies. People are exposed to thousands of media messages on a daily basis. The question is, how do mediums such as video games, which are predominantly based on violence, affect the consumer? Do representations of violence in video games have a significant influence on consumers, so as to evoke aggressive and violent behaviour in real life? This film looks at both sides of the video game violence debate. However, before we address this, it is important to understand the concept of communication in the media, as it is vital to analysing media influence. We will look at two communication models that are quite different in their theory of how communication works. Basically, communication in media refers to the passage of a message from one source, the producer, to another, the consumer. The first model of communication we are exploring is called the bullet theory. It is called the bullet theory because information is shot into the consumer. It is a linear model, meaning that the message travels in one direction, from producer to consumer. It is also referred to as the hypodermic needle model, in that the information is injected into the consumer. This emotive imagery relates to the theory's core principles. It suggests that the media has complete power over its audience and can influence large numbers of the population. Messages and representations are constructed to portray the desired meaning to the consumer. In this theory, the audience is completely passive and will always receive whatever information is sent and will always decode its messages correctly. This is a very early theory of communication and arose in the 1940s and 50s. At the time, television and radio were becoming extremely popular. Advertisement and propaganda were present in increasingly larger levels. It has since been concluded that this theory is not accurate and audiences do not always decode messages in their intended form. Other theories of communication arose that were more complex. However, it is interesting to apply this theory to the context of violent video games. If the bullet theory or hypodermic needle model did in fact work for some audiences, what sorts of messages would consumers be decoding when the gaming experience rewards them for acts of violence? The second theory we are looking at is a semiotic, meaning study of signs, symbols, and communication, constructivist model. It is called postmodernism. Postmodernism is a concept that appears in a wide variety of disciplines, including communication. Basically, postmodernism is a philosophy that reacts against the structured nature of an earlier philosophy, modernism. Postmodernism is based on the belief that no definite terms or boundaries exist, and there are no definite truths. It rejects the ideas of right and wrong, true and false, and good and evil. There is no one meaning, so to speak. This means that postmodernism is in stark contrast to the bullet theory or hypodermic needle model video games, for their strictly defined understanding of communication are more quantitative. Postmodernism rejects the idea of the ability to manipulate an audience to receive next-generation consoles by 2012. A recent survey postmodernism revolves around ambiguity and a multitude of different levels of video game equipment make a single truth average play time of 53 minutes a day. When postmodernism is applied to our context of violence in video games, one of the main arguments against this video game and their influence is the sheer number of people who play violent as meaning becomes don't commit unusual acts and impossible to define. Another states that it is human nature to be involved in conflict. Now that we're familiar with our history, monstrous acts of violence, we can apply them to the question of violence in video video games as an influential
It is just
factor
like saying all
consumer.
religions promote violence.
Of course,
in the
violence
name
in
of
video
God,
games is
because
only
of the
an aspect of
crusades
the
and
religious
overall
warfare that rages in certain parts of the world.
Violence is
Stated a
depicted in
concerned
films,
gamer
on
defending
TV,
his
in
recreational
posters,
choice in a
newspapers,
violence debate.
magazines, billboards,
It is
and
also
on the
argued
internet.
that violent video
However,
games are
video
just one
games are a
aspect of
unique
violence within
medium that are
society
potentially more
and are a
influential
product
than
of the
any other
culture we
medium.
live in.
This is because
In
of
a
the
world of
interactivity
increasing
they
media
offer the
exposure,
consumer.
desensitization
A play is not
to
simply watching the
depictions of
action
violence
take
occurs
place
naturally,
like in a film,
and people
without
understand the
participating in
distinction
it.
between the virtual
Video games
world
are highly
and reality.
immersive and require the
All
player
of these
to identify
pro-video
with the
game
main character
arguments
of
relate
whom
to
they
the
control.
postmodernist theory
When
of
this is applied to
communication,
violence,
where
it is the
complexity
player who
outweighs the
initiates the act.
possibility of a clear answer.
There is much debate on the topic of video
Much
game
of this
violence.
video game
One
violent
side
conflict
advocates
is
video
caused by
games
the
as a
issue
safe
of
form of
censorship.
entertainment that do not
Currently,
significantly
Australia is
influence the
considered to be the
consumer
strictest
become
Western
aggressive
country
and
in the
violent.
world for censorship
The other
of
side
video
warns
games.
of their damaging
A rating
effects on
system
society
exists,
and
much
calls
the
for
same
greater
as for
guidelines
films.
to control these
However,
violent games.
there is no R18+
An example
rating
of an
available.
anti-video
The
game
government
argument was
maintains the
presented
right
in
to
the
refuse
American
a classification
Psychological
and ban a video
Association's
game
Journal
if it
of
chooses.
Personality and Social Psychology.
Fundamentally,
in 2000.
this is an argument
The
between
journal
different models
included
or
two
theories
studies
of
on the link
communication.
between violent video
Those
games
who
and
advocate the
aggressive
media as
behavior.
an incredibly powerful force
One
that can
study
easily
revealed that
influence
young
the
men who are
audience,
habitually
and those who
aggressive may be
advocate the
especially
audience as having a
vulnerable
larger
to the
role
aggression
in the transmission of
effects of
messages
repeated
and their
exposure
meaning.
to violent games.
The evolution of
said
technology
psychologists
and the media
Craig
is
A.
happening at an
Anderson,
astonishing
PhD,
rate, and we
and
will
Karen
always be
E.
one
Dill,
step behind in
PhD.
trying to understand the
The other
effects of
study
new media
reveals that
upon
even a
us.
brief exposure to
Research
violent
of the
video
effects
games
and
can
influences
temporarily
of
increase
violent
aggressive
video games
behavior in
upon
all
the
types of
audience
participants.
will be ongoing.
The first study consisted of 227 college students. They completed a measure of trait aggressiveness and reported their actual aggressive behaviours, or delinquency, in the recent past. They also reported their video game playing habits. We found that the students who reported playing more violent video games in junior and high school engaged in more aggressive behaviour, said the lead author Anderson of Iowa State University. We also found that the amount of time spent playing video games in the past was associated with lower academic grades in college. In the second study, 210 college students played either a violent, Wolfenstein 3D, or non-violent, Myst, video game. A short time later, the students who played the violent video game punished an opponent by initiating a noise blast with varying intensity for a longer period of time than did students who had played the non-violent video game. Violent video games allow players to practice aggressive solutions to conflict behaviours and are rewarded for it. Some effects are likely to last longer as the player learns and practices new aggression-related scripts that can become more and more accessible for use when real-life conflict situations arise. One major concern is the active nature of the learning environment of the video game, say the authors. This medium is potentially more dangerous than exposure to violent television and movies, which are known to have substantial effects on aggression and violence. Other arguments against video games include fears of copycat killings that emulate acts of violence in the virtual realm. Another criticism held with video games is their stereotypical portrayals of race and gender. Men are portrayed as powerful figures that resolve conflict with violence. Women are usually portrayed as helpless victims who need to be saved. The principles of the bullet theory and hypodermic needle model underpin anti-video game violence arguments, as they assume that the message will have a direct effect on the passive audience. There is a large amount of research condemning video games as causing violent and aggressive behaviour in real life. The journal mentioned before is qualitative research and was conducted under strict experimental conditions.